Ready to explore the latest trends in real estate? What are innovators in building planning for the future? The Ralph Bivins Project digs deep into the minds of key players in the industry and discussions with today's thought leaders. I'm Ralph Bivins. As a journalist who's covered the real estate and development industry for decades, I invite you to join me as we probe for new ideas and projects that will be making headlines soon. We love to ask hard questions to interesting people. When you've done over 100,000 interviews, you seem to get enlightening answers. Don't forget to download and review this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your audio inspiration. You can also watch and subscribe on YouTube or visit realtynewsreport.com. Welcome. This is Ralph Bivins with the Ralph Bivins Project. We're here today with Danny Rice. He's head of Colliers Houston, a pretty significant commercial real estate firm with 120 people or so in brokerage, marketing, admin. They got a pretty big office and cover a lot of ground in almost every sector of commercial real estate. So, Danny, thanks for being here, man.
Appreciate you having me, Ralph. Looking forward to it and talking about it. It's been a great year moving here. So I don't know if you want me to do a quick introduction or.
Well, right, you came here from Florida, and were you with Colliers there for a while too?
Yeah, can I just do a quick little background? So moved here about a year and a half ago, give or take. July of last year is when I officially started with the office. Spent 21 years in Orlando, went to UCF in Orlando there. And then when I was in my senior year is how I got introduced to Colliers and got an internship with the research department, fun enough, and kind of got my base going with the office there and starting to learn about this industry. And then over the years, did a couple different things on the research side, marketing side, technology side of it, became a broker, was an office tenant rep, landlord broker for a number of years there. Did shift over to a company called Excelligent and handled a bunch of different things with their growth, but then ultimately brought me back to Colliers in Florida as the market leader for Orlando, Tampa, and Southwest Florida. And then this opportunity came about here in Houston and moved here a year ago. And it's been an absolutely fantastic year. The people in this office have been very welcoming. And I think kind of just big picture, the city has been very welcoming to myself and my family. And we've had a lot of new stuff to get to know and get to learn, and it's been great. And the city has offered so many different things for us to enjoy. So no complaints, no regrets. Houston is.
Yeah, well, we get hurricanes here also. I was looking, some of the news lately in the last few days. There's something kind of brewing down by the Yucatan Peninsula. And we're not sure if that's going to develop into a storm or not, but it could.
They've had enough
Florida one more time. They've been taking a big hit over there. That's I know that. What happened about, I guess what was it? Hurricane Milton.
Yeah.
Came across, October. It was Cat 5.
Huh?
It may have. What did that do to you? Man, it looked like it did.
Yeah.
Damage.
I think the state got a little luckier than what they expected, because when it was at Cat 5 and how fast it grew and the strength of it, it diminished pretty quick right before land and right when it made landfall. And then you had, Helene that was right before that, about 2-3 weeks before that. Helene actually did just as much surge damage to the west coast of Florida as did Milton when it came through. At least most of the people I still am connected with in Florida fared just fine. Probably a handful of people did unfortunately get 6, 7, 8, 9 feet of water in their house. So they've got some they've got to do to that. But overall, I think everybody was very fortunate. If that thing had shifted just, 20, 30, 40 miles north, and if the eye would have went north of Tampa Bay, it would have been a totally different story from a surge standpoint. So they got a little bit lucky. I think it's the right way to put it. Obviously, any impact is not lucky anyways, but I think overall they got a little bit luckier. But yeah, going from Florida, dealing with hurricanes to moving here, and then Beryl hits within, not too long of us moving here. We're used to it, so it's nothing new, I guess is the right way to put it.
We're all everybody's the insurance, is and it's a factor now. It's getting higher and higher, and I don't know. For affordability of properties and stuff, it's a big deal.
It is. It's putting a big pinch. Insurance is a big topic, and I don't think there's any solid answers onto that. I think that is an area that at some point probably has the ability to be fixed. I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, you got an exposure standpoint, cost of obviously a lot of damage that's been happening recently, but it has been a big challenge from an ownership standpoint. If you're an owner of a commercial building or a home, and the insurance cost is gone up significantly and continues to go up, and that makes it a little bit challenging. And it has from our business, from an investment standpoint, some of our clients, investors, it's pinched on what they can afford and what they can obviously pull through. And then the returns aren't there because of the costs going up. And so it's put a little bit of a challenge as well as for us.
Other news. Hey, just a few days ago, Donald Trump was reelected as president, and we did what's from a real estate and economic standpoint. You got any thoughts on what this change in administration and the White House is going to do?
Man, I wish I had a crystal ball on that one. Look, it's actually funny. We had our company meeting yesterday. We do a monthly meeting with all of our brokers and staff. And this was a topic that I brought up, kind of what's it mean for us? What's it mean for the industry? What's it mean? And trying to take the emotional, political side out of the equation. The past 6, 7, 8, 9 months has been filled with a lot of noise, a lot of contention, a lot of emotions, and a lot of opinions. And I don't think there's any right or wrong to everybody's opinion on it. We're all, obviously, that's the beauty of this country. We have the ability to have what we believe is right for ourselves, for our families, and for this country. But there's definitely a little bit of a gap there today in terms of those different perceptions. But speaking just from a business standpoint, especially kind of focused on the commercial real estate side, with this administration, I think it's going to be quite unique. You've got the entire, the House as well as the Senate, all aligned in terms of the same side of the table. I think from that standpoint, short term, maybe no major actions up until they really start getting going. But theoretically, if there's an alignment there is going to be changes that'll come. You won't have a House divided, and you won't have a stalemate as it relates to different policies that one side or the other side of the table has been trying to implement. Whether that's good or not, I think that's always going to be the left to be seen kind of a scenario. But at least kind of my excitement around it is at least that allows hopefully decisions to flow through, hopefully some sort of action to be taken and some sort of focus to allow those things to happen. So I think that one is a big one that is going to impact potential changes. If history speaks kind of similarly, there's going to be tax cuts, corporate tax cuts and individual tax cuts in different ways. What that means, where that goes, how that flows through, obviously left to be seen. But from our standpoint, if you've got, corporate tax cuts that happen, typically that means reinvestment back into their business, which potentially means growth in the business, whether that's new facilities, expanding office space, investing into office space, growing and opening new warehouse. I mean, there's so many different things that comes off of that potentially could, kind of stimulate the economy a little bit. The tariff conversation is a very good one that we have been focused on. And I think there's a good and a bad to that one, right? So if all these tariffs go into place, which we expect, the consumer might feel a little bit of a pinch and you might see inflation go up a little bit. But on the flip side, it's going to bring manufacturing or there's a lot of businesses, especially overseas, that have been targeting the U.S. If we have to put an office or we have to put a warehouse, we have to put the manufacturing facility there to try to get around the tariffs. Obviously, in one way, that's great from the commercial real estate side of it. And that means activity. That means growth that we're probably going to see. And Houston is a great spot for everybody to look at. I think it was Prologis that did a report recently that said 20% of all new warehouse leases year to date this year was from Chinese-based firms. It is focused very much on the exact point of what was potentially to come. And even in our own office, we had a meeting a couple days ago, and that was one of the topics that after the election with Trump taking office, we have seen a spike in some international business that is looking at it from that standpoint in Chinese firms. So I think
The Chinese, if the tariffs are hit, I think what you're saying is if the tariffs have been talked about and Trump has put a lot of emphasis on that, particularly focus on, Chinese and commerce with the Chinese and their imports. But you would think that what you're saying is the Chinese need to establish a beachhead here in the U.S. for the shipping or some manufacturing, light, whatever they do.
Yep.
You can see some pretty significant activity from those guys from China opening facilities here
Correct.
around Houston.
Yeah, and look, this administration I think is definitely and publicly known is going to be much more oil and gas and energy supportive, and that obviously for Houston being an energy capital of the world, that's also another boon that's going to be possible or positive for us, kind of looking ahead as well. So I think, for me, kind of and really taking off the political component of the emotional side and some of the social components of what obviously may be coming changing, but from a business standpoint, it's positive. I think from a commercial real estate, what that impact is for any Houston related businesses. But there's, at the same time, there's a lot of volatility in that administration. There's a lot of concern. And so sometimes those social components will influence the business side. And so we'll see exactly what that will all shake out at the end of the day. And you still have to have the alignment with Congress to get some of these things to pass through. Just because it's one side or the other, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be passed through. So we'll see how that all shakes out. I think it's going to be a very intriguing next 12 to 18 months. I think that's when we'll really know how this is going to look over the next 4 years. The Department of Government Efficiency that's been created, the DOGE, Elon Musk behind that. So I think it's fantastic. It's a way to really scrutinize it, be very public and transparent about it. We'll see if that's as serious as what it is, and I think there's a lot of good that we can come from this as well. So where it all goes, I think the other thing I'll touch on, actually, I missed this one, but rate cuts. The Fed obviously did their 50 basis point cut at the previous meeting, and then just recently the 25 basis point. I think probably with this administration, that'll slow a little bit because if the tariff stuff, if inflation potentially is going to be going back up or just challenged in terms of what has come down over the past 12 months, you might see that slowing. So we might be in that, higher for longer kind of mindset. But you're saying
it may not be a rate cut in the next few months.
I'm on the camp right now that I don't know if there will be another rate cut this year. I know that there's a leaning towards there possibly is going to be one, but with some of the recent economic numbers that have come out, I think inflation just went up slightly higher than expected. Employment overall is still positive. Unemployment, I believe, dropped in various areas. So there's still a lot of really good stuff happening, which is still growing the market and obviously putting pressure on inflation. So that's where it's going to be this little bit of a give and take. And I would not be surprised if at least at the end of this year that there's not a rate cut. But I do think going into 25, there will be. It just may not be as aggressive because the economy is still humming along pretty well and inflation is still just slightly higher than they want it to be. So,
well, I just taking a look at some of the sectors in commercial real estate. What's your take on let's talk about retail centers for a while and retail development and things like that. What do you guys see happening there in that sector?
I mean, it's funny. I talked about this. I can't remember what event it was, but retail has been a very bright and shiny object for the past, call it 24, 36 months. Whereas right after the pandemic, there was a lot of scare around what exactly the pandemic is going to do as it relates to the in-person shopping, the in-person experience. But I think what we all realized is that the average consumer wants that experience, wants to be in front of people, wants to enjoy the time out of their house and out of the office. If anything, it accelerated that to even higher importance. And so retail for us has been fantastic. The activity's been strong. The biggest challenge that you got is there's just a lack of supply as it relates to the demand for retail. And any of the good spaces get sucked up instantly and there's a line behind it. And from that standpoint, we would love to see some more development, but the development cost and everything associated with it has kind of pinched it where it's hard to pencil out a deal to then have the rates be at a point where the retailers are getting a little bit more cautious around what their rates are. And that's creating a little bit of a slowing condition, but generally speaking, for us and kind of our perspective on retail going into the next year is positive. I think that's a shiny area that's going to keep going, and especially here in Houston, as we keep having population growth growing, and I think that's going to continue on. That's only going to mean that we need more retail, and the retailers can continue to have Houston as one of the markets they want to either expand in or expand within going forward as well.
Home building is still kicking along pretty brisk.
Yeah, I would agree.
We got to have those people need a place to shop. You touched on something there that I wanted to follow up on a little bit. The experiential retail. Everybody, okay, Amazon's become such a force, and other online shopping as a whole, e-commerce.
Yeah.
So they're saying, well, to get people to get out and to go to the center instead of just ordering it online, we want some experiential retail, and let's have fun. Let's have, of course, food and beverage and other things. Even these indoor putt golf courses, mini beer golf. I guess those things are hot and everything. That whole idea is interesting.
I think it was happening before the pandemic, right? So to your point, I think you mentioned Amazon. The Amazon effect, the headlines were retail is going to be dead. Amazon and e-commerce is going to take over the brick and mortar store. Obviously, it dynamically changed the way retailers had to think about their business to attract the consumer, and that is that experience work, right? And so over those next 10 years, sure, we saw a significant amount of retailers close the doors, but we finally have gotten back to the place where now there's more openings than there is closings. And then the pandemic happens. That then basically instigated, as I said, that the experience is even more important to the consumer, where they want that fun. They want the ability to enjoy it with themselves. And, in some ways I hate social media, but social media has absolutely created that experience at a whole nother level, where people want to showcase publicly through their phones and through their social media networks, that experience to their friends and to their colleagues and family and everything. And so you've got to match that same experience at the retail level to have the consumer be excited to come there to then ultimately be successful. And so all of that dynamic has shifted, which put a big pressure on cost, right? The build outs of these spaces are significantly more than they ever have been. The boutique and more trendy places are much more popular than just the chains have been, where it kind of was the standard of where you'd go eat. And so all of that stuff has definitely made it a whole different world as it relates to retail in a good way. I think we were up for that, that kind of revolution around retail to make it be the experience. But a retailer today has to now think about their entire, what do you want to kind of omnichannel of all of the different ways that they have to get to a consumer. And today the consumer is so much less loyal than they were 20 years ago, right? Like it was like, this is the spot that I'm going to go to. I'm always going to that. Now it's, all right, that was fun, but I want to see what else is new and cool and have that experience. And so everybody's much more willing to try things out and experience different things. And so that makes it even harder for the retailer to stay relevant. And I think that's partly why you see sometimes ones that'll be around for a year and a half and then they're gone. They tried it out, it didn't catch, and they're out. And then there's other ones that it catches and it's got a long-term road of success. But that, and not to purposely segue, but I think office space is in that same boat today of what it was 10 plus years ago for retail, where retail, Amazon is theoretically going to kill retail. That didn't necessarily happen. It just forced the experience and it forced the change around how retail was. Office
the retail Armageddon, like we kept hearing that over and over.
It really was. And so then you go to office space, and that's what happened during the pandemic. It was already starting to happen around remote work and the experience of the employee and the employer relationship. And we're going through that same transition over the past 4 years. And I think there's a few more years of figuring out what's the new office usage and how do employees, employers interact, and what does that experience look like? So we're just kind of in the next trend of shift, right? And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Before I forget, I remember you. I saw you give a speech months ago, and you mentioned a new retailer or something like that. I don't know if it's a retailer or what they do, but something called Meow Wolf that just opened here in Houston. Experiential to the max. It's a big. What have you seen that yet? Have you?
I have not gone to the one here, but I did go to the one in Denver. And you want to use that word experience. It is an experience, and I think you said it is a real deep experience of all kinds of different mindsets and ways. But again, it's kind of evoking the way that we go through the world of experience around the consumer with the retailer. But this is more what I would call that. It's more of art and experience, right? So it's a way for people to showcase what art can be through different types of mindsets. And you go through these different rooms and different areas, and you almost feel like you are jumping from different countries or different cultures or different mindsets, and you could totally see that when you go through it. So to the point, artwork, but it's taking like trash and making trash be artwork, and it's doing it in a way where the entire room is themed in a way that you're going, well, this is all just a bunch of trash, but yet it looks awesome, and it's a really cool experience. And then there's tunnels, and there's mazes, and then there's buses, and the buses are decorated in different ways. There's fire trucks, and it's just, just be ready to be kind of overwhelmed. I never support drug use or any of those things, but I could see where there were some people might have been on something to have to create some of these pieces of art, because it was wild.
Yeah, smoke a little bit, go meow, I guess. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I met the guy, one of the guys that was developing one in Vegas, maybe 5 years ago, Las Vegas. It was called Area 15, which is kind of play off Area 51, where the UFO stuff was supposedly centered and all that. I didn't see the finished product, but this guy was an artist and putting it in, doing these displays, and I'll have to go see it. Not going to do the pot, but I'd like to see it, to see what the hubbub is about. It's talked about a lot.
Yep, I agreed.
Okay, that's a multifamily. You guys have had a Colliers pretty strong multifamily organization, and in terms of investment sales and finding investors that want to buy apartment complexes and things. Tell us what's going on in that sector.
Yeah, look, it's in high demand, but it's also one of the most challenging ones to pencil out lately. The price of multifamily skyrocketed, then the price of insurance has obviously skyrocketed, like we talked about earlier. Rents have gone up significantly as well. There was just a glut of development that happened, and it put some pressure on there. And so, over the past 12, 24 months, with rates increasing significantly, that's probably the one area that had the biggest drop off in terms of investment activity. And it was just directly correlated to rates. And essentially, if you're at, you're buying it at such a low rate, and ultimately the next buyer is having to buy it at 3x of what it was, it's hard to pencil out the returns on that at the end of the day when you also factor in the rest of the stuff with insurance. So, I think for us, the past probably 90 days to 120 days, the light at the end of the tunnel has gotten brighter. There is definitely a lot more interest from sellers to potentially take some of their products out to the market. I would almost say the biggest reason is there's just at least a little bit more clarity around where the heck the market is. The past 24 months with rate increases that was happening, the unknown if there would be any rate decreases happening, it just kind of kept everybody in a pencils down type of a scenario. And the transaction volume shows that. So, the BOVs and broker price opinions that we do, we've been doing a lot more of those over the past, like I said, 90 days, 120 days. And there's definitely a lot more interest going forward into next year. We still could use a lot more development. If you look, if you look downtown, the downtown skyline is behind me here, and there's two towers right now. There's two buildings that have cranes out there, so two cranes that we can see, and they're both multifamily. So there's still obviously activity happening, but not at the level that it was. And so it's going to take some time to get through that that demand that is out there for it as well. But it's just a pricing challenge with rates going up and the cost of capital being where it's at to what it was before. And there is going to be some distressed stuff that's going to come from that over the next 12 months, in my opinion, but not significant enough where it's going to be overburdened. But there will be some good deals and opportunities for some buyers over the next 12 months as well.
What's your take on the conversion of office into apartments?
So hard to do. There's a couple examples that have happened here in Houston, and there's obviously examples across the country. The biggest challenge becomes what's the main structure of that office building, and does it allow for all of the MEP and all of the setup for an apartment complex to be in an apartment complex, right? The cost to convert it is significant, where again, it's hard to get it to a point where it just makes sense from an investor or developer to do it. I think you're going to see government support behind that, because if you look at a downtown skyline, or if you look at some of these suburbs, and you've got these office buildings that have just absolutely gone south, and they will never be an office building again. Well, what in the hell are you going to do with that building? And at some point, there's got to be an incentive from somewhere that's got to come to say to a developer, this is what we would love for this to be. And whether that's, tax cuts, rebates, just cash, directly to the development, who knows? But, I've been on a couple different boards that has come up as the desire. And I think there's some cities across the country that have started looking at that as well. But again, it's still hard. I don't know if I've got a complete support behind it. It's obviously talked about quite a bit, and something needs to happen to some of these older office buildings. But to make it a multifamily complex, it's just tricky to do from a cost standpoint and a structural standpoint. It's almost easier just to tear the damn thing down and rebuild something on that site. And I think that's where some of the conversations have been going, is we'll incentivize you to tear it down to actually make that be a multifamily property, versus you have to pay in the cost to tear that thing down or renovate it. And it just doesn't make sense. So.
Yeah, speaking of office, I think, your latest quarterly stats, we're talking about an office vacancy of 26.8%. That's got to be one of the highest in the world. It's very high. And, you're sitting there, you're thinking, maybe tearing down the buildings to make a conversion plot or whatever is. I don't see what else, what other levers are there to pull to get this, vacancy down from 26.8%.
It's just like the old malls that there's tons of malls across the country that have gone vacant and dark, because the way that the consumer wanted to shop is not in those big malls. Like they used to be. And we have that here in Houston, the same type of issue. Office buildings, the way that the office buildings laid out, the functionality to them, the feel, the look, all of that, parking has now become antiquated, and it's going to have to change at some point. But yes, 26% obviously is high. But if you really peel the onion back and break down where the true demand is and the desire, it's not as bad as what it is. It's a case of the haves and the have-nots. And the owners of office buildings that are in the right location with the right quality of the building and the right investment to support those tenants, they're doing fantastic, right? They've got tenants that want to be in those buildings, and there's not a line per se, but there is a line of interest. And then if you go to other parts of town and the buildings just aren't well taken care of, or the demographic has shifted, or whatever the case may be around those areas, they're the ones that are absolutely hurting. And I don't know what you do to those buildings outside of, to your point, tearing them down. And so we do have a very high office vacancy. I don't know if that should necessarily scare anybody, but if you're the outside looking in, it looks scary as hell, because that's a big number.
Yeah. And what about, we're talking about different areas of town that have differences. I guess we've got downtown, and then we've got suburban space. That's the way it's always been divided up on the stats.
Yep.
But still, there's differences in the different suburbans or places, or have different quality of office markets. What is the energy corridor still pretty preferred.
Yeah, if you were to probably put a ranking, I mean that the West Galleria to the Energy Corridor, that area, that's the top of the list, and that's where the vast majority of the activity is. And it makes sense because I've read some study about 6 months ago, it probably was at this point, but the average consumer before the pandemic, or average employee before the pandemic, had about a 9 to 10 mile drive to the office. With kind of the shift that happened during the pandemic, where people assumed that they could work a lot more remote forever, so they bought houses out further because they could buy a bigger house for at less. Now the average drive is 24 to 29 miles or something like that to where their employer is. And so if you're the employer, you're having to figure out, how do I accommodate this shift that has happened? If I stay in downtown, let's say, and if I'm asking my employee to drive 20 miles each way at gas prices that are still elevated in some ways, they're going to start to look at companies that are not there and closer to their home. So everybody's had to shift to kind of move closer to their employee to be competitive. And then for them, that also is a cost benefit because they're not having to pay for parking as much. They're also able to get a little bit less of a rate, maybe more TI dollars, so they can build out their space to have a better experience for the employee. And that's how they're trying to engage them to get them back into the office as well, so that their culture and their overall growth is there. So yeah, the West Corridor, that's the kind of the KD freeway, but also into the energy, that area has been probably the biggest demand that we've seen over the past 12 months, give or take. And I think that's going to continue to be there, and we'll see some more growth happening.
And the Woodlands, I think we have a separate office in Woodlands. Correct?
Yeah, we got a separate office in the Woodlands as well as down in Sugar Land. And both of those areas are also growth areas. There's been a significant amount of growth that's happened. Woodlands is almost its own major city, even though it's part of the whole MSA, but it has seen unbelievable growth, as you know, over the past 20 years. And I think that's going to continue to see that. It is an option, but again, it's got to have the right match in terms of where the employees are. Are they living on that side of town, or are they living here? You've got higher incomes up there, and so it can support and create a kind of a different focus than maybe what we would see in certain parts of Houston as well.
Yeah. And of course, Colliers is pretty strong in industrial and the port, all that. Just what's the total warehouse picture going on? Lord knows we see a lot of big ones still being. It seems like a lot. I mean, I think your latest report, Patsy put together, said there's a little bit, not quite as much construction as there was in 22 and 23, but still, it's just not dead. There's still good stuff being announced all the time.
You just hit it on the head. I mean, yes, construction activity has come down. I actually think that's a great thing, because if we stayed at the same velocity of construction activity, at some point the demand is not going to be able to meet what that activity was, and then you get your surplus of space, which then creates the challenges and so on and so forth. So, we always have to do a good job. I'm kind of talking holistically. The past 2 years, in 22 and 23. And maybe a little bit into 21, we're just an elevated amount of activity, more than anybody ever anticipated to happen, more than any normal that we've ever experienced. And for us to feel like that's what the market should always be is an irrelevant or just an incorrect way to think about it. So for us today, when we look back at those past 3 years, it does feel like it's a lot slower. But when you compare now to pre-pandemic, we're doing fantastic still, right? And so it's all relevant to what you're comparing against. I think we've got 15 million or so square feet that's under construction, and from that standpoint, there is definitely starting to become more interest from the developers to start to pull the trigger on some sites, because the demand is there. It's just a matter of maybe not doing as much, and that's what we saw last year. Not as much spec development. Don't take the risk. We'll sit on the land. And then hopefully, ultimately, when those tenants start to show more and more activity, we'll start to pull the trigger, maybe not do it as early and have a tenant in tow and do a build to suit. But that activity is still strong. We had a record year last year in this office. This year, we're down slightly, but overall, still a significant amount of industrial activity. And then talking to our team, next year looks just as positive, if not more positive, around industrial. It won't be as heightened as what it was in 22 and 23, but it's still going to be damn good. And I think that that is obviously overall just the support of what Houston is. Population growth, as I've mentioned a few times, is going to keep driving that. And then the port, as it continues to expand, and if some of this international business continues to come here, that's just going to be more industrial activity that's going to keep coming. So pretty bullish in terms of what we've got ahead over the next few years. We'll see what shakes out with it, but we're ready for it.
And I guess another demand, just demand for land. That's an indicator, I guess. What are you seeing there?
It's just as strong as ever. I mean, sure, it slowed down quite a bit, a little bit over the past 12 months, and that was really kind of more again as a result of rates increasing and just trying to figure out how the capital runs into it. But from our standpoint, we've got a solid land team, a lot of work around single-family residential development, obviously as well, selling land for multifamily, selling land for industrial. All of those brokers in our office, pipelines look solid. And I think from my standpoint, if you got I think you kind of hinted to it, but if you got good interest from developers on land sites, it just still means there's a lot of confidence in terms of the next 5 years here for someone to want to pull the trigger on a piece of dirt to be able to hold or to develop it. So from that, all positive as well. It's definitely slow, but not to the point of any concerns.
Well, I guess the big question where we're ending 24 about gone will be soon, and just overall looking ahead, kind of a forecast for what 2025 is going to be like.
Yep.
What would you say about that, Danny?
I think 25 will be comparable to 24. That would be my kind of feeling, but it'll have different ups and downs in different parts of it. I think the investment world will be much more positive in 25 than it was in 24. 24, it was just, again, you couldn't pencil out some of these investment deals based off of where rates were. I think we're getting back to I hate to use the word new normal, but this is where we're at. We aren't going to see great fluctuation, even though the Feds have dropped rates. 10-year Treasury's actually gone up. And so you actually aren't seeing much in the way of actual rate reduction from a lending standpoint. But I think what we'll see is just the same general positive activity that we had in 24 with some spikes in certain areas that have been slower. Industrial, like I said, it's down from what it was in terms of development. Maybe some of the bigger leases may not be as often, but it's still going to be a very positive compared to pre-pandemic levels. So 25, I think, is going to be good. I think the new administration, that could have a very positive impact, and we'll see some stuff that comes from that just in terms of activity. Hopefully there's not any other turmoil that comes from it, or some of the different things, like I said, on the social side. But I do think from a overall standpoint, big picture standpoint, kind of heading into the next 12, 24 months, I would say a much more positive, a little cautious optimism a little bit. There's still a lot of stuff that's out there from the banking side and some challenges, or national debt is extremely high. The amount that we pay on the interest on that, there's a lot of negative. So if some of that gets cleaned up, we'll be in a good place, but there's still a lot of pressure out there that's going to come, and some cleanup that's going to have to happen.
Danny Wright, Colliers Houston, thanks a lot for talking with me today, and really great. So we'll hopefully talk again pretty soon. Okay,
Ralph, appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. And been loving this city. It's great to be here. Everybody's been very, very welcoming. So thank you to you all as well.
Thanks, Danny.